everyone. Really sorry about the delay. A few technical problems, but we will crack on. So, welcome to our talk today. My name is Harry, and I'm the Operations Director at Time-Based Arts. We're here today to talk about the Channel 4 idents that were launched last June on Channel 4, funnily enough. So Art Practice produced the 25 idents, which were directed by 17 different directors represented by Art Practice and Love Song Films. On stage with me here are three of those directors, Mike Battcock, Fabrice and Nezet, and the Romantics, who are Ralph and Jay. Visual effects played a huge part in the project. Every ident was previs by TBA's head of animation, Nick Smalley. 6 VFX supervisors were on set, and a crack team of VFX artists worked for 3 months to create the seamless VFX present throughout all 25 idents. We have called our talk, Channel 4 Idents, The Importance of Heart and Craft. Our directors will discuss how they got involved in the project, how they responded to the brief, the process around the conception of the ideas, the execution and craft involved, and share any reflections they have a year on. We will then open the floor for some questions. Here are the idents for you to see before we start talking about them.
Once a man, twice a boy. In this life you'll be. I used to look up to my dad, now he looks up to me. Roberto Baggio, Gol Lazio. Cross my heart and dash the key. Durdle Door, Channel 4, we're all mates from here on in. With Deansgate, Queensgate, Dundee Cake, Village Fate, scratch the pattern off the plate, and everything in between. The writing bag of pipes, stalactites and stalagmites, a 10 kg bag of rice, cup of sugar, teaspoon of spice. For this is the island life. Downing Street, sinking pints. With Guru Murphy, Blackburn Burnley, the world is yours, you're one and only. Get to know me, don't disown me. This fly tipping Great Britain, potholed United Kingdom. Welcome to the WAL, the ENG, the NIR, SCOT. I'd rather be beside the sea, beside you, beside me. For life is one long train track. You're going to go through tunnels, it will go black. But I pray you make it out the other side, because I'm not ready to say goodbye. Please text back with the love of my life. A red kite above the M65. But it's a power shower, booze cruise, wouldn't last a second in your shoes. Tomorrow's headlines, yesterday's news, out with the old, in with the youth. For life is not a dress rehearsal, and your story will not write itself. Take it from your mind onto a shelf, into a school, into a home, faces illuminated by mobile phones. Wait a second, open your mind. Your worst enemy might be your best friend in disguise. Red sky, shepherd's pie. A Renaissance painting at the end of the night. For tracksuits to the new 3-piece suits, 3-piece suites to the new front row seats, most pleasures in life are measures of release. Only love can set you free. Orkney and dolphins under clean sheets. For this is the land and where we live, where the sex is almost as good as a kiss and the reward far outweighs the risk, and if you never shoot, you'll never miss. Or don't fear the future, or be afraid to fail. You're the only one of you. Fly free, set sail. Because we're going, gone. Life is precious, not here for long. Life is bumpy, beautiful, and treacherous. Your dreams will shatter when you least expect it. But everything is possible because you are here. Life is infinitely better with you in it.
So to give you a little bit of background on the project, Channel 4 was created to represent unheard voices, to challenge the status quo and innovate. In 2021, they launched a new brand platform, Altogether Different. This was in a response to an increasingly divided Britain recognising difference as a force for good. The concept that opposing forces and thoughts stimulate debate, drives progression, and ultimately brings us together. The brief was to write a concept for a new set of idents that expressed these core values. A cinematic partner to accompany the newly designed rebrand, which brought back the iconic 4 logo in a cube motif, where the 4 acts as a guide through the universe of the channel. The 17 directors were encouraged to think up ideas that were individual to them. Through a process of curation, 500 concepts were reduced to 25. These were defined by 5 themes: identity, who we are; the land, where we live; release, how we escape; system, what controls us; and love, the only thing that matters. Mike Scrogatic, founder of Art Practice, and Lindsay Aitken, executive creative director from Channel 4, were the brain boxes behind the whole idea. We also collaborated with the writer and artist John Joseph Holt, who wrote and performed the words that accompany the film. Each ident was executed using a different technique, all together, but all different. The idea actively encouraged contrast in every aspect, but the imagery is held together by the system and rules of the visual language, the 4, the cube, and the camera move. The concept behind the camera move being an endless arc, arriving in a new space with every cycle, each time presenting another 4 in a different world, allowing for a rich and diverse tapestry of contrasting imagery to be held together in one system. And that leads us perfectly on to our first director. This is Mike Battcock. He is joint head of 3D at Time-Based Arts. He was a CG supervisor on the whole project and also directed one of the idents at sea. Mike, I know you're going to discuss the ident you directed later, but first, can you give us an overview of the VFX for the whole film and the work that you and Time-Based Arts did on the project?
So at Time-Based Arts, we were brought on from the very beginning of the process. Firstly, for creative development for the ideas, and then secondly, how to actually pull it off and make it all possible, because we knew it was a huge undertaking that we were about to embark on. So we did extensive previs for nearly all 25 idents. We supervised every shoot on set, and then of course we did the post-production. And we worked primarily on 21 of the 25 idents, which I've highlighted here. And in some cases, we just had to integrate our CG4 into the live-action plate. And in other cases, there was more involved CG and effects work, like setting the 4 on fire, in this case, or adding a fully rigged and animated CG elephant. And in other cases, it was fully CG, like the environment and the fox you can see here. So one of the main concepts of the whole film is this infinite spiraling camera move. And this was an early proof of concept of that camera. And the goal here was to make it feel hypnotic and to draw you into that next ident. And it seems like quite a simple camera move, but this was a really crucial part of the process because this camera was going to be used for all 25 idents for both the CG and the live action. And it was quite unusual in that it was predefined for every director. Usually a director would come on set with their DOP and craft a camera move together. But in this case, it was locked before the director even came on the project. So that was quite unusual and quite difficult for some of the directors. Some of them wanted to change the speed of the move or move the 4 or the camera. And we had to say it has to be part of this framework and be this consistent visual language. So that was a bit of a struggle, but ultimately having that constraint kind of forces you to think about other areas and think creatively in other aspects. So it was actually quite a freeing experience as well. So this is the same montage that you saw earlier, and this is showing the previs for all 25 idents. And in most cases, we were able to visit the location before the shoot on a tech recce, and we did a 3D scan of the environment. And then back in the studio, we were able to place our 3D camera move into that environment, and then you could properly visualize the shot, which you can see here. And then that just meant everyone was on the same page, and when we came to shoot it on the day on set, everyone was aware of what we were about to do, and there were no surprises. One of the main technologies that we used was motion control. And essentially, we were able to take our camera move that we had designed in previs and plug it into the motion control camera rig, and it would execute that exact same camera move on location. So here it is in action on some of the sets. And we had two different motion control rigs. One big one, which is called the Titan, which you can see in action here, and a smaller one, which had more precision and could also do high-speed moves, called the Bolt. We did also discuss using drones, but ultimately we decided we wouldn't have the same kind of control and precision that we did get with motion control.
Thank you, Mike. As we mentioned, you also directed one of the idents at sea, which we'll watch now. And can you take us through the creative process for that ident?
Yeah, so you saw in the film earlier that there are varying levels of intensity and energy across all 25. Some are calmer and more reflective, whilst others have more energy. And I knew that this could be one of the ones that was more epic and visually exciting, but I really wanted it to have a strong emotional aspect and a strong narrative to it as well. And in the beginning, I found that quite challenging because there were very few elements to play with. It was essentially just the fall and the sea. And not having any people in it, it lacked that human element that's so strong in some of the other films, like Ralph and Jay's, for example. So I found I had to lean more on the viewer's experience to provide that human element. I really wanted to evoke feelings of fear and vulnerability, so I wanted the viewer to feel like they're the ones lost at sea. And I actually found that an ocean is actually a really fertile ground for telling an emotional story, because there's so many connotations with issues we have today, like whether it's migrants crossing the channel or sea levels rising or climate change. So I knew there was a strong emotional backstory in that space already, and I thought the viewer could bring a lot to it themselves as well. And I also found that that infinite camera worked really well in that regard, because you start off with this wide frame where you establish your scene, and then you slowly kind of track into the center of the story. And being a one-shot, I found that even more powerful and immersive. It's kind of like I always found that in films like Children of Men or 1917, those kind of long single takes are really powerful because they don't give you the opportunity to look away. They kind of lock you into the action. So that really kind of helped that immersive feeling. So in this case, you kind of enter this ferocious, hostile world with driving rain in your face, and then you're plunged underwater with lightning flashing above you, and then you're eventually released out the other side and you move on to the next ident. So that was my goal, to make it feel really scary and visceral and powerful for the viewer. So I began the process by looking at lots of photography of oceans, and I found that even in these images, still images, they did evoke feelings of awe and power, so I really wanted to harness that in the film. And in my work, I tend to do a lot of effects and simulation, so whether it's water or fire or destruction, I've found that within visual effects, that can evoke the most emotion and life for a shot, because although it's kind of destructive and chaotic, it can be really beautiful as well. And this was a really key reference for me. This is from a documentary called Weathering the Storm. And it just has some incredible shots that show the power and the scale of the ocean, and some great camera angles as well, like this one, and this next one, which has this kind of wonky Dutch camera angle that was a big influence for the final camera that I used.
Thank you for that insight, Mike. So can you explain to us how you actually went about making the ident?
Yeah, so I started with a simple previs, which you can see here, just to establish the timings and the scale of everything. And you can see in this version, we actually go through the water just there. And early on in the process, this was a mistake. I hadn't planned to do that. I'd made the waves a little bit too big, and it kind of clipped the camera. But I thought it was a great opportunity to build on that narrative that I mentioned earlier, so it ultimately became a really key moment in the film. And then I also added this kind of global rocking motion, as if the 4 is a ship cresting over these huge waves. And I just thought that added a level of kind of seasickness and anxiety to the whole piece that, again, evokes some emotion from the viewer. And I think it's the only ident where the 4 is actually moving, but because that motion's applied to the 4 and the camera together, that visual relationship's preserved, and it's kind of consistent with the other idents. One of the main challenges with this shot was the scale of it. The ocean was about 3 kilometers wide, and the camera starts really wide, so you see that whole expanse. So I had to simulate and render that whole patch of ocean, and then you ultimately end up really close to the ocean and to the 4, so the fidelity of everything had to be really high as well. So that was a constant balance, trying to find that balance between the two. And this is just an example of one of the effects passes. So this is the spray coming off the white caps of the waves. And then on top of this, there was the rain, the main splash, the water coming off the 4, the bubbles underneath the water. And once that's all combined, there was something like 250 million points, so 250 million points. So it's a huge amount of detail in there, and it was very technical and kind of slow to iterate and work with at times, but you need all that detail in there to make it feel real. And then once that gets rendered out of 3D, this is just a breakdown of how it gets composited in 2D. And of course, sound played a huge role in this. Once you have the sound of the crashing waves and the rain and the lightning, and then you get submerged underwater and you kind of lose those high frequencies in the sound, that all really helps to feel like you're there and to make it more visceral and immersive. And the sound actually came quite late in the process, along with the poem as well. That was kind of a really nice thing for a lot of us, because we saw only the visuals for kind of 90% of the time, and then the sound of the poem came late, and that elevated the whole thing massively, and it just wouldn't have the impact that it does if it didn't have the sound. So yeah, overall it was really challenging, probably the most challenging project I've ever worked on, but really rewarding and something that I'm really proud of.
Thank you very much, Mike. Next up, we have Fabrice, who is a creative director at Optical Arts. Here are the idents he directed: Surveillance and Microscopic.
Hi. So I started my career as a 3D artist and designer, and shortly after moved into working more as a director. And 5 years ago, I joined Optical Art, which is a still pretty young studio, focused on visual experimentation, both in live action and animation.
So Fabrice, because Optical Arts is represented by Art Practice, the production company that made the project, obviously the opportunity to direct was there for the taking, but could you talk us through your process for brainstorming your ideas?
Yeah. I mean, it took a little while because I remember the project was a little bit slow to start at first. There was like so many unknowns. And one thing I remember is I struggled a little bit at the beginning because the brief was so open. I mean, basically everything we had to start with was like, we have to talk about life, society, somehow the UK, and that was it. And yeah, so it wasn't so easy to structure like the thinking, like to come up with idea at first. And then on top of that, we had like that camera move, and we also knew that we had to feature like the 4 logo. So I started by gathering like a lot of visual references, like anything I found interesting, and I'm a very visual director, so anything I saw could be interesting to develop, I gathered. And at that time, I wasn't too sure what would be the role of the 4 logo. Would it be like a passive element at the center of the scene, or would it be like the hero element? And actually, in the end, when we look at the ident, we can see that it's actually a bit of everything, depending on the scene. But yeah, that was actually a lot of questions to sort out early on. And looking at the other director involved in the project at the beginning, I could see like most of the other directors were more live action and more performance based. So I wanted to propose something a little bit different, a different type of imagery to the project. And I was working as a director, but also like part of Optical Arts, so I also wanted to propose ideas that represent us as a studio, as a voice. And so we are very much focused like on architecture, science, illustration. So I wanted this to be part of the world. So this is like, for those like not familiar with our work, like this is a very short showreel of what we do. As you can see, like our work doesn't involve like a lot of people, and that was actually one of the challenge for us, because for a project that is all about like emotion and that has to talk about like humanity in general, we needed to find ideas that could talk about like human and people in general without actually necessarily showing people. When naturally, like I choose to focus like on science and technology, because I saw. I mean, first of all, I started like studying mathematics like early on, so that's a world I'm very familiar with. But I also feel like science and technology are very universal in the sense that it is created by human and also is done like to serve human, to help human. And I also saw that there was something interesting in those visuals. I mean, for instance, when we look at the arbor picture, I think there is something in all the utilitarian design that is like there is like some codes which are created not necessarily for like aesthetic reason, but which are still very interesting. For instance, like all those color on the container. I mean, it almost looked like an abstract painting, so I wanted to use those code and digest it to create some the ident, basically.
You mentioned earlier that you had lots of ideas at the beginning of the process. So what made you select the ideas that you then changed into idents? What does make a good idea?
Well, I mean, I imagine that's a very personal question. I imagine like, I mean, to me, like every idea, I mean, maybe not every idea, but most of the idea can have some potential. Personally, I'm always looking for something original generally in the concept. I love like any concept-driven idea. And if not like, if nothing new in the concept, I always try to find like a different angle, a different approach when it comes to creating the visual, just to try to create something I haven't seen before so much. And on this project, one thing that was really hard actually to judge early on is like how it's gonna work like with that camera move. Like you can have an idea, but you with such a complex camera move, you are never too sure like how it's gonna work. And one thing I found out like very early on, building those previews, that really helps us like to actually see what works, what doesn't. Was like it was not just about like working on an action and placing it like at the center of the scene, because the camera is traveling so much. We almost like needed to design like a space where you will have like different center of interest, like different layer. The scene needs to work from a wide from a wide angle, but also later on as a close-up. So it's like, yeah, it's a gallery of little like elements that are interesting to look at.
Because you have been working in 3D for such a long time, you're obviously very experienced. So would you say that having some technical knowledge is a plus for a director?
I mean, yeah. I would say in general, it's useful, especially when like, when like the design play a key role in a project, or also on project where the budget is not so big. I mean, it's a good solution. Like it's a good way to cut corners and actually to get a lot done without having the need of a lot of artists. I can sort of do a lot myself, and acting as a designer and a director, I can take a lot of decision and do a lot of it. So that's great. But the problem is like when you are really at the beginning of the project, you just want to purely focus on ideas and not so much like take all the technical things into consideration. But it's very hard actually to stop your brain from thinking about like all those things. So I mean, anytime you have an idea, you feel, oh yeah, how I'm gonna shoot that, or if it's CG, like, oh yeah, but I'm gonna need like a huge team to be able to achieve that. So I mean, all those things, you sort of want to put that on the side to just focus on idea. And actually on this project, because there was like so many unknown in terms of like the technology involved, and at some point we, as Mike said, we explored like the idea of using drones, and I just decided to, yeah, okay, let's forget all about it, and yeah, let's just focus on idea, and that was quite liberating, and it was good. So I'm just going to talk a little bit of the microscopic ident I directed. So those were like the first picture like I gathered where I saw, oh yeah, there is really something I love in terms of texture and design. There is something I really want to develop, and I think, I mean, as well as the originality of the concept, sometimes it's just like the fun I'm going to have working on something is really important for me too. So this is like a rough previs I designed to place like the element to sort of find out like what size will work well, and all that. And because most of the other ident were in colors, like I also started by exploring like those like a look like which is like some sort of post-colorization like applied to microscope vision. And I thought there was something really interesting into that. But actually, it was a bit of a failure, because when I applied that onto the design, I mean, the picture was like so complex, it was really hard to know where to look at. I mean, it was just like way too busy. So I decided to keep those elements, but actually to change my approach on the lighting, and so to keep like very detailed microscopic elements, but to approach the lighting in a more like intimate, more filmic way. That way, like I only get to light what I want to see, and there is a lot of black, which creates something more mysterious and more poetic. And yeah, no, this is like the second ident I directed, which is called Surveillance. And on this one, I mean, talking about like not not thinking about like technical consideration. That's really a good example because, I mean, I had this idea of like forming the 4 out of like lots of people using like some color tracking system. And I don't know exactly what I had in mind when I came with this idea, but it's I mean, obviously if you want to shoot something like that, it will be like incredibly complex. But like Mike Scragg from TBA actually offered like to do it in CG, and I was, oh, okay, that's great. So I started exploring like this concept with by playing with different previews. So at first, I imagined, oh yeah, we could exit like in a cube that would be part of a metallic sculpture on a place. And I tried to scale up the scene to have more people, to have enough definition to be able to read the 4 logo, like even bigger. But then I decided to go away from that sculpture because I saw that because it's on the edge of the screen, it's actually not so readable. And I wasn't too convinced, so I came up with a different thing where people are queuing, and then we exit like in a tube entrance. And then I had to sort of work out the story because, like, I mean, if I had like all those people like forming the 4, it's like, why do they queue? I mean, they can't just be there for nothing. So I came up with that idea of like, okay, there will be an art center, and then there is like this sort of exhibition organized like around some container with people queuing, waiting, and they are going in. And so I sort of wanted the scene to make sense in a way. So those are some reference like for the location. So I wanted this to be universal, so not something that is necessarily based in London, but something that could be in any like big city in the UK, with a mix of like modern and older architecture. And finally, yeah, one thing like I played a bit with was like the pace of the scene, because I really wanted to focus on like the movement of the crowd. I saw that actually treating the scene as a time lapse would be better to have like, yeah, to see more movement basically. And that will create something more interesting with the tracker. And this is also more interesting, like when it comes like to the lighting and like the shadow playing on the element. So it's basically like going through an entire day. And as I said, like the CG on this ident like was done by TBA, which was like amazing. To craft this, and Mike was actually acting as a supervisor on this project. So I don't know if you have anything to add on the making of.
Yeah, so it was a big challenge in that it was, again, kind of similar to mine. It was such a big space that you have to fill with so many assets and so much detail to make it feel real. But a big part of it was the crowd simulation and making that believable. So there was a lot of kind of logic that you put into that. So they kind of join the queue when there's enough space, otherwise they walk past. They all have a destination where they're going to. They're not just kind of randomly walking around like ants. And we also built a traffic simulation so the cars can kind of turn properly and merge, and all to make it feel believable. And then there's a lot of small details that we added. So like when the sun goes down, the car headlights turn on and the lights turn on in the windows. And there was even some hero characters that are kind of going up the stairs, or there's a couple that take a selfie just before you exit the ident. So yeah, a ton of small details that went into it, but it was a really fun piece to work on.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabrice and Mike again. Next up, we have Jay and Ralph, who direct under The Romantics. Guys, could you tell us a little bit about yourselves and let us know what your reaction was when you first received the brief?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah, I think like everyone, when this brief came in, we were just insanely excited. It's the Channel 4 Idents. It's such a big part of British culture. And so we were just like absolutely buzzing at the fact that we might have some of our stories on TV for like 10 years. Even though the brief was really wide, it was all about what it means to be British, it was the perfect brief for us because our story is all about developing and like exploring identity and relationships with a view of changing perspectives. So it was really great. And also, coincidentally, our first ever film we made was post-Brexit, and it was all about British identity and reframing what it means to be British in a post-Brexit world. Most recently as well, our latest film, Brown Brit, that's just come out, is all about British Asian identity as well. So it just felt really spot on that we could work with Channel 4.
Yeah, I think what's quite interesting about the way that we work is it's sort of always a mix of two perspectives. Me and Jay are quite different races, different genders. I'm from up north and Jay's from down south. So that always like feeds into our work, and we really challenge each other to ask, why are we telling the stories, and to make it more emotional and more nuanced. So when Channel 4 came in, it was with the perfect brief, we felt, because they've always created stories that felt, that really resonated with us. And yeah, we've got a lot of shared memories of shows like Skins that connected with us both, even though we were on different sides of the country. We've always felt like Channel 4 is a real portal into the soul of Britain. So on the screen there, we pitched 32 ideas. There's a selection of them up there. And we always ask, like, why is an idea up there? Why is it important to us? We want to find stories that connect with people and resonate. And obviously, with this brief, you only have 8 seconds, so it was all about triggering an emotional response from people.
And some of the ideas are relevant to both of us and maybe a bit more generic, but a bit more widespread. So we've got things like queuing, pick and mix, stuff from like childhood. So like Mr. Whippy, fun fairs, and also teen years of going out for the first time or your first kiss.
And then there's stuff that's a bit more specific to me. So we've got potholing, maypole dancing, scarecrow festival, and running through a field in your underwear.
Stuff I'd literally never heard of before in my life. And then for me, there was obviously some ideas that were really specific to me. So like Ralph said, I grew up in London, and so I wasn't running through fields like him, but like on an estate, that was my concrete playground. Also like the night bus, all those sort of experiences that happened then. Lots of just very female-based experiences. So one of the ideas was about what happens in the girls' loos on a night out, and like the culture surrounding that. And basically the two ideas that were chosen were Front Door Kiss and The Great British Night Out.
And yeah, we were really, really excited to get those ones because they both were really relevant to both of us, and we feel the best ideas are always the ones that you're really excited to make. So we were really, really, buzzing to be on board with the project and doing them.
So, as you say, you were lucky enough to get 2 of your idents chosen. Could you talk us through the concepts behind each of those idents? Because you mentioned earlier that you wanted your work to change perspectives. So how did you apply that to these ideas?
Yeah, so with Front Door Kiss, it's not a new concept, but it's in every film and every story. It's like that epic build-up, the climactic moment, the will they, won't they, and then the first kiss in the rain. So it's even though you've seen it before, it's a moment that everyone still loves and it resonates with.
Obviously, me and Jay as a duo are interracial, and usually characters in this scene are often white and heteronormative, and being in a position to be able to change the lens on that is really important to us, and we do that in a lot of our work, so that's why we...
Yeah, and representation is so much better now than when I was growing up, but it still has a long way to go, and we always feel that minorities tend to still be the secondary to the lead roles. So that's what we wanted to do with this, was to put these characters at the heart of this scene and reimagine the iconic film moment with the rain and the epicness of it, but with characters that maybe you don't always see in front of the lens. And this is Ident.
Our second one was inspired by this viral photo of a night out scene. I think it was New Year's Eve in Manchester.
Yeah.
It's something that we can relate to personally, and we felt that most people probably have a version of this in their own mind. It's something that everyone seems, especially British people, have some kind of an affection for it. But we really wanted to tell that story as you remember it in your mind's eye. It's not the gritty reality from the outside point of view, but it's the dreamy, romanticized, nostalgic version that you remember.
And so the way that we decided to tell this was we looked at paintings and we were like, these moments are always depicted in culture, historically, and we were like, we want to tell it through this lens. We want to capture that nostalgic memory in the kebab shop at the end of the night, but create a tapestry and kind of create the rich tapestry that makes the Great British Night Out.
So we decided to execute it as a frozen moment, and we felt that was the best way to capture the chaos and all its beauty, that perfect moment. And we wanted it to feel that when you're in an art gallery and you're walking by a tapestry painting, we wanted our ident to feel like that. So you're passing through the scene and you're being rewarded every frame, you're rewarded with something else.
And this is the ident.
It's such a great idea to create a modern-day tapestry, but once you decided on all the elements you needed to include in it in order to build this night-out scene, how did you do that?
So firstly, we just started with tons and tons of research. So in order to create something that cued this tapestry, we just had to understand what actually goes into these paintings. So we were studying composition, lighting, pose, expressions. We started looking at painters like Caravaggio, who have really highly emotive scenes, and they really caught mid-action.
And then we did a really big deep dive into nightlife photography, and that was all about understanding facial expression and body language. And what was interesting, there was a kind of a natural synergy between these Caravaggio paintings and the nightlife photography. So we felt we would definitely go down the right route with how we wanted to execute.
And then also just understanding the environment. So again, like Ralph said, we were just sitting, looking through all these weird photos of nights out and just seeing what's consistent across all of them. So obviously you have these lost items of clothing everywhere. You have the litter, you have the kebabs, the drinks everywhere as well. So we wanted to make sure that we rebuilt that in our scene so it felt authentic.
And like I was saying earlier, we really wanted it to feel, to romanticize the scene, and so lighting was really, really important. There's a temptation to go down the more sterile and gritty view that you sometimes get in a takeaway shop, but we wanted all of our light sources to come from traffic lights, the neon signs above shops, so it really felt, more beautiful, more rich.
And that helped us make that sort of romantic, dreamy landscape then, even with reflections and puddles and things like that. And then next, when it came to actually choosing our characters, we started studying, again, all the images, and we started noticing it's the same tribes that you see everywhere in all these photos. It doesn't matter which location in the UK or what year this was shot in. You always have the group of hen girls, you have the young lads, you have the random guy in a suit who's come after work, or the man on the floor. You have your performers, and then everyone around the kebab shop owner at the very end of the night. And so we sort of noticed this through everything, and so we wanted to make sure that we included this in our scene.
Yeah, we wanted it to be instantly relatable to everyone, something that everyone could recognize straight away. So you can see our cast here, it's 20 strong. That was probably the most complex part of the process for us, because you want every face to be really interesting, but it's a real balancing act that if you push one too far, you inevitably have to pull someone back. So finding that sort of balance between the cast was really difficult.
Yeah, it was like a complete house of cards. The second we changed one person, we'd have to change the whole cast after.
Guys, I've been told we've got 5 minutes left. I'm so sorry,
we'll talk really
but
fast.
I'm wondering if you want to jump forward to the post-production bit, or is there another section you'd like to talk about?
What should we jump to? I think we'd probably maybe skip to the next section. It's technical. I think that's...
Yeah.
This bit?
No, keep going. We'll skip wardrobe and stuff. Yeah, here. If you go back, yeah.
Go back.
Back to that one here. Yeah. So a big question was about how we were going to actually achieve the frozen moment. So whether we were going to do it by scanning people, scanning the locations, and then comping it together, or doing it on location, all in camera. So we actually spoke to Mike about this at the time, and if you can just say a few bits.
Yeah, so we discussed the two different approaches, one being scanning all 20 actors, so it would have been a huge amount of work to take on in CG, and ultimately digital humans are still the hardest thing to make look real in visual effects, so we thought the best approach would be to try and get as much in camera as possible, and then we'd augment that further with extra visual effects.
Yeah. And then also we just had to find the location, so we had to find the right kebab shop where the scene was going to happen, but find somewhere that was actually, the roads were wide enough that the camera could actually fit in, and luckily we managed to shut down this road, which was quite nuts because that's Glasgow Central Station right behind it as well.
Here you can see the previs, which was so invaluable to us. Once we had our location, we were able to map that and really understand what we were seeing frame by frame. It enabled us to maneuver the composition and understand how packed we could make the scene and pull people out.
Yeah, and it allows us to just position people, and as you, like Fabrice was saying before, as you travel through the scene, you're actually seeing something completely different every time. So having this previs kind of process allowed us to really play around with the composition and keep changing it until we got it right.
This is just a little diagram that we used on shoot. It seems super simple, but it was incredibly helpful to us just to have it clear so we could operate quickly on the day where we would position people.
And you did loads of preparation in the lead up to the shoot, but when working with such a big cast on location outdoors, I'm sure there were challenges in achieving the frozen moment that you couldn't have anticipated until you were on set. Can you quickly talk us through some of these?
I think the biggest challenge was time. It's only one shot, but trying to keep everyone still is really, really difficult. But we had 1 hour, and the weather was really cold as well. It was Glasgow, and it was at night, so trying to keep people still was really difficult. But the cast, they were amazing. They did an incredible job.
And we couldn't really just keep people just stationary the entire time as well. Every time between takes, we were having to put coats on people and stuff. So every time we did it again, we'd have to put everyone back into position. And like Ralph said, we had an hour from start to finish to get the whole thing. So that was quite tricky.
And if there was an inconsistency in the way we put them back, then that take would be not usable.
And then actually, on set as well, all this research became really helpful. So we started recreating all those poses we were looking at earlier. So like you can see on the top left, we recreated the man reaching out, but did it with the kebab shop owner passing a kebab. We recreated the Cinderella moment on the bottom left, and the top right as well, recreated how the light from a candle was coming out of a phone.
And here this was all about really we wanted the whole scene to feel alive, so making it mid-motion and not staged. So we gave all of the cast marks, words to say to each other, so it really felt like it was mid-action.
And then when we were actually on set, we spoke to everyone, got advised that we would be shooting in plates so that it would be easier to manage in post later. So we shot the scene by itself, then we shot people in the background, the mid-ground, and then the foreground. And that actually gave us a lot of more control as well with directing, because obviously trying to direct the entire cast in one go and making sure everyone's still was probably near impossible.
Keeping your eyes on 20 people is difficult.
Yeah.
And VFX played a massive part in most of the idents, but with yours being live action, how much of your scene was created in post-production?
Like Joe said, it was shot in plates, so initially the comp was rebuilt from those plates and massed together. But really, I think what sells it as a frozen moment is all the things that are added in CG, like the balloon there. It really helps tell the story that it's not moving, and it sells the idea.
And then here's a before and after, so you can see what we actually shot in camera versus what we finished with. So like Ralph said, it was so vital that we had things that really sold the idea that it was a frozen moment. So like the balloon caught midair. We also have some of the girls, you can see in their breath, we've got cold air coming out. We have hair whips at the back, so we gelled that girl's hair, but then in CG got the hair kind of moving. We also have spillages out of cups, so we created resin cups that looked like they were spilling, but then actually added all the splashes out in VFX at the end. And then there's also some little Easter eggs in there as well, so we've got a fox hidden in the background, and then we built the whole background as well to add more cars and people. And yeah, here's our final items. Well, we spoke really fast.
Whilst they are playing, I'm going to see if anyone's got any questions. We've probably not got much time, but if anyone does have a question, please let us know. Has anyone...
No, yeah, so this was, he wrote it, everyone thinks he wrote it first, but we'd finished all the idents and then he wrote his piece over the top of the 3 minutes, which is insanely impressive. And we're saying it elevated all of our work so much as well, having that sort of emotional poem going over the top of it.
Have we not got time for any more? No.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sure. Please come and say hi. Sorry we raced through that at the end there, but thank you for coming.